90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we're going to get some guidance for parents to prevent their children from having problems with the law. And our guest is Richard R. Ramos, and he's a school counselor. And he's going to give us ideas on how to help our children avoid having problems in life and avoid having problems with the law. Richard, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I know that you have many good ideas for parents out there on how they can help their children avoid problems with the law. And let's start with, what are some common pressures or issues that parents are facing today?
Well, I think one of the common pressures, of course, is coming from social media. There's a lot of pressure on kids to show a life that maybe they're not always living, but they want to be on TikTok, they want to be on Facebook, they want to be on Instagram, and the competition to show that, oh, they have such a wonderful life, this and that, but at the same time, they're being lured and recruited in many cases and influenced by things and by people that parents may not always be aware of or appreciate.
And again, with social media, the grass looks greener on the other side to children, and we know it's not quite the case, and it's not a perfect world out there.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, this is a phenomenon that has just kind of taken off, especially during COVID, when we were all kind of locked down and the only communication we had with each other was on the social media. But it's gone to another level. And I think that if parents are aware of their kids and who they're talking to and all that, that's fine. But in many cases, what I have found, and when kids start getting in trouble and the laws come in, is when kids are starting to be influenced to do things that we as parents would not want them doing, whether it's drugs, whether it's gangs, whether it's sex, whether it's dropping out of school and those kinds of things.
So what are some ways that help parents can have preventative practices to keep these things from happening? And at what age is it appropriate to start them?
Well, the literature out there showed me or told me in my research that when kids really begin to be influenced in negative ways is from the ages of 12 to 15. I teach in Parents on a Mission, the curriculum that I wrote and the book that I wrote, that it should start the moment they're born, this winning of their heart, the winning of their mind, the winning of their loyalty. But I would say one promising practice is for parents to really teach family history, family traditions, and family legacy to give their kids something bigger than themselves to anchor their heart and mind and their soul in. So that's one strategy that we teach as far as a promising practice.
And do you also encourage kids as they grow, or parents to, as their kids get older, to slow down the use of social media and help to manage it?
Yes, and that's a major challenge. And so what I encourage there is it's really about relationship and investing our time and showing our kids that they are the priority of our life. I mean, we're all busy, we work, kids understand that. We can't be at every event. But when they know that, but when my dad can be, when my mom can be, they're there. They're involved with me. They show up to the game, the recital, the dance, whatever it is. And that's one of the key ways that we can influence them to have us time eyeball to eyeball time and not everything just through text, email, and social media.
And is it good to have kids engaged in some of those activities you mentioned, so they're doing something beyond looking at the phones, whatever they're maybe depending on their strengths and interests, but to engage them in some kind of activity?
That's one of the most important things, I think, is keeping kids busy, because if they're not busy, what are they doing? They're hours and hours on video games, hours and hours in social media. So yes, any of those kinds of extracurricular activities are very helpful and healthy for families to connect and keep that good relationship.
And it's important to find parents who are similarly inclined, so that maybe your child becomes friends with theirs, and together you're trying to provide positive alternatives to social media.
Yeah, I think one of the things that does that is sports. I think that's a big thing still here in our country, and that builds that team connection with kids, with other kids, with different ethnicities, maybe different religions, different cultures, different class lines, but they come together in that team spirit and they have a purpose together. And that of course, is a huge way to keep kids on the positive road and off of the negativity that sometimes can come through the social media platforms.
And you offer parents guidance, as to best practices in dealing with their kids. How does your approach differ from other approaches to parenting?
Yeah, the main distinction between Parents on a Mission and other parenting classes is that other parenting classes teach parents to focus on their kids, to fix their kids, or give them techniques to deal with their kids. Parents on a Mission teaches parents to deal with themselves, to fix, quote unquote, ourself, to look within our own self and make sure that we are not part of the problem and that we are dealing with our own maybe emotional issues and things that we went through maybe as children, and make sure that we are constantly growing in our emotional maturity. So the focus is on the parent and not on the kids. Or as I like to say, we're not focused on the problems that rebellious kids create. We're focused on what creates rebellious kids.
And what are some of the ways that parents should focus on themselves? Are they looking at their present personality, looking back at their childhood?
Yeah, Paul, I teach 4 steps. The first step is in this type of growth and emotional maturity is understanding the power of knowing yourself. So that takes self-reflection, slowing down, and just having that time to reflect on knowing who I am, knowing my moods, knowing my strengths, knowing my limitations, my weaknesses, etc. The second thing is understanding the power of my thought life. And there's a whole lesson on these things. The reason that's important is because my thought life leads to my choices. And my choices are, I can make choices, but I can't control the consequences. So that's part of emotional growth. And then the fourth step is dealing with forgiveness. 3 ways about forgiveness: forgiving others that have offended me, being forgiven by those I've offended, and then forgiving myself maybe for past regrets. So those are 4 basic steps that we teach parents on how to grow in your own emotional maturity. And that goes a long way, and then how you're dealing with your kids.
And is there, in dealing with your kids, should there be a little flexibility in what you allow them to do and how you deal with them? Should you help them? Should you give them some choices so they have some self-control of the situation?
Yeah, I think there always has to be a good balance when we're talking about discipline, that we are fair. Kids understand that we are firm. Sometimes our no needs to mean no, but also flexibility. I always use the example of, if you ever got pulled over by a policeman, a cop, and you were busted and you know that you were guilty, you were speeding or whatever it was, and the cop gave you a break. So here's a person in authority who could easily give you a ticket, but they didn't. They showed you some discretion and they showed you some flexibility and gave you some grace. And I think for parents, sometimes that's important, that it's not always about the letter of the law.
And you want to have a conversation with them about what they did wrong and how it could lead them, how there might have been better approaches, and you hope they'll do better in the future.
Yeah, that's right. And in that conversation, we're always trying to help them understand the bigger picture, which is that me as an authority in your life as a parent, I don't want to lose my authority to the law, to the judge, to the cops. I don't want to lose that. But if you keep going down this road, that's something I can't control. And so you're always having a conversation where if kids are starting to get off track, maybe they're experimenting with drugs or alcohol, it's always healthy to have that conversation to help them see the bigger picture and avoid, things like court and juvenile hall and things like that.
And do you think it's good to use incentives as opposed to discipline? If they do something or they achieve a goal, or at least they follow their plan, they'll get a benefit as opposed to a punishment?
Well, incentives are always good as long as they're not used as bribes and as long as it's consistent. Incentives, there's nothing wrong with incentivizing people. And the other thing or our kids, I should say, the other thing we want to avoid is giving our children an entitlement mentality. And I see that's another huge issue with a lot of parents today is children, a lot of them, they have this entitlement mentality as if we owe them or the world owes them or the job, I should get the job and I should get the grades and I should get the first string, this entitlement mentality. So as long as we have a balance with incentives and discipline, then I think that's a healthy way to go about helping our kids navigate their way through different situations.
Okay, I'd like to remind our listeners we're talking to Richard R. Ramos. He's a school counselor, and as you've heard, he has come up with a process to helping parents understand their important role, parents on a mission. And you're listening to Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. If you missed any portion of this program or you want to tell someone else about it, just go to nccradio.org. What is, you mentioned in your book the home field advantage. What does that concept mean?
Yeah, the home field advantage, being a former athlete, I like to use metaphors like that. And if you know sports, a home field advantage simply means that if you're playing on your home court or your home field, most of the fans are in your side and you're familiar with the field. And so you should have an advantage, the home field advantage. What I say there is children that are born, you have them in your care most of the time, from the time they're infants until the time they go to school. And so for the most part, you should have an advantage. And in the research, it shows that when kids hit the ages of 12 to 15, that's when they start to kind of get out of line a little bit. So that tells me that I have a 12-year window of an advantage to be raising my children, instilling them with my values, building my relationship with them, winning their heart, winning their loyalty, spending time with them, so that when that pressure comes at the age of 12, I've had a 12-year window of an advantage because, for the most part, most of the time, they are in my care and under my roof and in my authority. And when they get out there in the world at that age, hopefully those values that I instilled in them are what's going to carry the day.
And what's the best style for the parent to take in trying to teach them best practices, reining them in when they go a little bit astray, and dealing with any lapses in their judgment?
Yeah, well, what we teach, there's some basic three styles of parenting. One is the authoritarian, one is permissive, and one is the authoritative. We advocate the authoritative because authoritarian is simply a kind of a dictator, just
my way or the highway, yeah.
My way or the highway, that's it. Permissive is like they don't see themselves as shaping character, and so it's do whatever you want.
It's a free reign childhood.
Free reign, and I don't advocate that. Authoritative is the balance between the two. Your kids know you're in charge, but you have a culture of communication and dialogue, and together you establish rules of conduct and rules in the house. And there's fair, like I said, fair, firm, and flexible balance of discipline.
And how can you raise children to be positive members of society, possibly provide a positive image for their peers?
Yeah, in that we advocate several things, but so three very important. One is that we teach children that they have a purpose, that they were born on purpose for a purpose. And then, secondly, our role as parents is to help them discover that purpose. And after they've discovered it, then our role is to help them develop it. And when you're doing that with children, they have a bigger sense that they have a purpose in the community. They have a focus on developing their special gifts and talents. And the other thing we can do is tell them, so teach them and tell them their worth to us. Their worth to us as a family member, their worth to me as a son, their worth as a student, their worth as a citizen in the community. And if we are doing those kinds of things, we are sending to the community positive, contributing citizens of the community. That our children are not just our children, they are also children that we send out to the neighborhood. And the question is, what kind of citizen are we sending to the neighborhood, to the schoolyard, and to the society?
And when they're dealing with their peers, is there some kind of positive intervention you would encourage children or their parents to undertake?
Well, there again, that goes back to that 12-year window where I've established myself not only as an authority figure, but also somebody that my children love to be with, that we have fun together, and that I have influence in their life. And so when I know that they're going to make friends, I know they're going to have peers, and I know they're going to be tempted. And they may make wrong decisions from time to time. That's just normal and natural, like I did and most kids do. But what's going to win the day is, again, I like to say I've inoculated my children with integrity, because we cannot hide them or keep them from all the toxins that are out in the world, all the temptations. But what we can do is we can immunize them with integrity and values, and hopefully that will build their social immune system. So when they go out into the world and they're pressured by peers, they know how to say no, they know how to draw a line.
And not just the pressure of peers, but what if they see a peer who needs, let's say, their support or maybe their guidance? Do you empower them to act in some way, to listen or to guide? Or if, as a parent, you see a parent who's having a difficult challenge, do you try to guide that parent?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we need more in our society is caring for one another, being concerned, being willing to go the extra mile and go out of our way and to help, our neighbors, instilling in our children and ourselves, having honor of other people, caring for the welfare of other people, caring for, needs that are out there that we see if we can do something about it. And I think when parents are demonstrating that to their kids, maybe they're feeding the homeless, or maybe they're wrapping gifts at the mall for free, or there's all kinds of services that we can do to teach our children that life is bigger than us and our own family. We have a citizenship to contribute to, and there's a lot of ways to do that.
And so it's important to teach children at a young age to give back to the community and help others who may not be as fortunate as themselves.
Absolutely. Yes. I think it's very important. I think we need more of it these days.
And what if a parent is dealing with rebellious behavior? What are some approaches that you suggest to them?
Well, there's a couple of things about that. Number one, if a child is constantly being rebellious, there's two things I caution parents to think about. Number one, it might be a cry for help. That child might be being bullied and threatened. You better not say anything. If you do, I'm going to beat you up, or we're going to do this or that. And so maybe kids getting in trouble sometimes, that might be a cry for help. The other thing is, unfortunately, a cry for help might be because there's some kind of abuse going on somewhere behind the scenes, and again, they can't say anything because they're being threatened, and so they're getting in trouble. But the third thing about that is, if it's just a rebellious, stubborn, hard-nosed, strong-willed child, then I talk to them about the role of the farmer. There's the role of the nurturer from 0 to 2. There's the role of being a trainer and disciplinarian from 2 to 5. There's a role of being a life coach from 5 to 12. But after that, if kids are still rebelling, then I call it the role of the farmer. And if you want, I can quickly go over what that means.
Yes, please explain that concept to us.
So we all know that farming is hard work, and we all know that no farmer reaps a harvest overnight. So that tells you right there, dealing with rebellious kids sometimes can be hard work, and it can sometimes take a while. And that's, again, why emotional maturity is important. But all farmers plow, plant, water, and cultivate to get a harvest. The plowing, I liken that to, use a metaphor of confrontation. That's me having that hard conversation again. I can be psychologically worn down, but I can't give up. And a lot of parents give up. You got to confront kids if they keep doing the same thing over and over and over. You're late again. You're drunk again. I told you not to do that. You ditched school. There has to be that confrontation. That's what I call plowing. You're plowing their heart. You're dealing with their conscience, letting them know their behavior is not acceptable. Planting is what I call the words that we use. And this is very important. To know how to say negative things in a positive way. So instead of shaming them and guilting them, I've learned, and we teach, to say things like, this is not who you are. You're better than this. I love you. I believe in you, but I don't accept your behavior. This is not the person that I know you to be. Those kinds of messages, you're still confronting them, but you're telling them a positive thing, a negative thing in a positive way. So those are the seeds that we plant. The watering is affection. Anytime we can show affection to our kids, a hug, a high five, anything like that, everybody needs that physical touch and affirmation. Well, actually, the cultivation is affirming, giving them a word of encouragement. Hey, son, good job. That was great. Thank you for cleaning your room. And rebellious kids, even though they're being rebellious, we got to catch them when we can, when they did something right, and then affirm that. And sometimes it's hard to show affection to a child who's being rebellious, but that again takes emotional maturity and takes humility, and that breaks down their wall of that rebellion and hardness that they're showing towards us.
And show them there's another path they can go on.
That's right. And what I say there, the law of the harvest is on our side as a farmer, because whatever we plant, that's what we're going to reap. The only hard part about it is I can't tell you when you're going to reap the harvest, but through my own personal experience, I can tell you, if you persist, you will reap the harvest if you continue to plow, plant, water, and cultivate.
And just to remind our listeners, we're talking to Richard R. Ramos. He's a school counselor, and he's also the author of Parents on a Mission. And if you want to tell someone else about the program or listen to it again, you can go to the website and hear the podcast at nccradio.org. And you're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. And also there are other resources available to parents. There might be a teacher, a guidance counselor, the possibility of social workers or child psychologists available, through, the medical profession. And, getting those people involved sooner rather than later can also help to keep the child on the right path and deal with any issues they're facing.
That's correct. There's lots of, I have a saying about that. Number one is that everybody says it takes a village to raise a child, and I say that it does not take a village. It just takes good parenting, because the village today is not the village when we grew up. And a lot of the people a lot of things out in the village are really kind of the enemy that are luring our children away from the respect for authority of parents, the values of families. But on the other hand, So that's one side of the village. But on the other side of the village, there are plenty of people out there who can help us. And that's where the coach and the pastor and the priest and the counselors and teachers, that's where they come in, because there's plenty of those good kinds of people. But I think parents also need today to hear it's your responsibility to raise your children, not the village.
And Richard, just tell us your website and what else people will find out on the website, information about the best practices in raising their children and the other ideas you have for them.
Yeah, they can go to parentsonamission.org and they can learn there about my parent mentoring program there. And also, if they want to buy a book, they can go to my publisher, outskirtspress.com/POM. That's outskirts, that's one word, OUTSKIRTS, outskirtspress.com/POM. And there they can get the book. They can also, from there, they can download a PDF, and they can also read a chapter there, a sample chapter there about the book.
Okay. And what is your final advice to the parents in raising their child?
Well, I think if I were to try to give one piece of advice, it's really about integrity. It's about me owning up to my mistakes as an adult and showing my kids that I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong and apologize, and that my relationship with you is more important than me being right. And a lot of kids I've counseled, and that's the one thing they used to always tell me, Mr. Ramos, you don't know my dad. You don't know my mom. She never says she's sorry. She never says she's wrong. He never would admit he's wrong. If we would own up to our own mistakes, have some integrity and humility, ask for forgiveness, and let our kids know it's not about me being right. It's about me and you having a good relationship.
And from day one, we're modeling, parents and even people in the community are modeling behavior for the kids. Even if they can't speak, they're watching what we do, what we say, how we interact with the world, how we interact with others, and how we deal with adversity.
Absolutely. The kids are watching and listening all the time, even when it doesn't seem like it. And we certainly are a role model. We're not perfect. I say it's not about being perfect, Mom and Dad. It's about being honest. And that'll win the day. That'll win the heart. We can be a hero to our children, even though we're not perfect.
Okay. I'd like to thank Richard R. Ramos for being our guest and the author of Parents on a Mission. And if you missed any part of the program, please go to nccradio.org. And please join us next week at this same time on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York.